Before Alabama's Devontae Smith and Pitt's Jordan Addison, we, Oklahoma State, were the kings of producing the best wide receivers in America. You know what? We want our crown back. And thankfully, we've got a guy that can bring it home.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at AllDayOState. Today, we're going to roll right into this conversation of the Cowboy wide receiver greats that have come through here, like the Dez Bryants and the Justin Blackmons and the James Washingtons and the Tylan Wallaces. Seems to be a thing of the past. And before Pitt's Jordan Addison and Alabama's Devontae Smith won their most recent Biletnikoff awards, Oklahoma State were the cream of the crop when it came to wide receiver awards and wide receiver development on their way to massive careers in the NFL. That has kind of taken a little bit of a back seat recently. And this previous season, we did watch Dejon Stribling had a pretty miraculous season, as did the main man, Brennan Presley, going on to be the all-time receptions leader of Oklahoma State history, but it still didn't garner the national attention, and it definitely didn't put any of the Cowboys up in the top echelon of the wide receivers up for the Biletnikoff Award. Tay Martin did surpass 1,000 yards, and it just like Brennan Presley was able to do the same thing, but that used to be a massive benchmark. Now it's just kind of a calling card for a talented wide receiver. As Oklahoma State looks at the quarterback room this season to help provide a lot of that spark that Dejon Stribling and Brennan Presley at times didn't get last season. The quarterback battle will no doubt end up being a major contributing factor in the wide receiver room, but part of that is the wide receivers bailing out the quarterbacks. Some of the best wide receivers that we've had were hand in hand with some great Oklahoma State quarterbacks, but even some of the great Oklahoma State quarterbacks like your Brandon Whedons and your Mason Rudolphs and your Spencer Sanders, they would openly talk about happen to have a guy that can go up and get the ball, to be a guy that can bail them out of bad situations. And even though we had some of those guys last season, due to the inefficiencies we had, the offensive line and some of the backpedaling and the things that Alan Bowman did, it didn't really give us a lot of opportunities to take the top off the defense and give our wide receivers ample amount of opportunities to put themselves up for these awards. Fast forward to this season. It is going to be huge for this Oklahoma State wide receiver room to get us back to where we used to be, but also just to simply open up the offense for whomever is going to win the quarterback battle. Realistically, having mobile quarterbacks should benefit the wide receiver room because the wide receiver is typically always going to have the advantage when it comes to some semblance of a scramble drill. We've talked about the numerical advantages that a mobile quarterback can bring when you're looking at the defensive side of the ball. That's also going to open up some lanes for the wide receivers. But at the end of the day, you have to have dudes that can make plays and make things happen, even when it doesn't look like it's really set up to do so. And the latest, I think, for us in regards of who could potentially win another Biletnikoff, I think naturally a lot of people are going to go with Talyn Shettron. Talyn Shettron, unfortunately, has been dealing with some health injuries throughout his time at Oklahoma State. So even though we've seen glimpses of him being a tried and true great Oklahoma State wide receiver, he hasn't gone through an entire season yet healthy. So that is a question mark. And we did bring over Shamar Rigby from Purdue, who, much like Hoss Haney, was too good to keep off the field. So they found creative ways to get him on the field, whether it be a 5 wide receiver situation, or they have a stack, or they put him in motion, or they get him in on reverses. He's going to be able to factor a lot into this equation, as is Jalen Lloyd, the speedster from Nebraska, who has a 2022 national championship in track and field, who also finished 3rd nationals in the 100-meter. He is somebody that you could basically, kind of like Tyreek Hill, just say, hey, go deep, I'm going to chunk it, and we're going to score touchdowns. That was one of the beauties of quarterback Dax Garman, is he had a very nice deep ball. And Dax Garman was taught by the same guy who teaches Hoss Haney. So the connections here are going to be pretty remarkable if we can get the most out of our wide receiver core. Then you have Gavin Freeman, who played most of last season in the beginning, and then he kind of gave way towards the end of the year to DeJuan Lofton. Was it a redshirt procurement situation, or was it just DeJuan Lofton showing the capabilities a little bit more than Gavin as the season progressed? Regardless, we're in a very good position as we do, in fact, look forward. And the guy who I think could lead us to another Biletnikoff award other than Talyn, if Talyn can stay healthy, is none other than Ayo Shotomide-King. And you guys know, last year he was kind of my sleeper wide receiver to make a big name for himself. I do kind of feel like we wasted his season last year. However, he did get in some games. He did go up against Travis Hunter against Colorado. He caught some passes, and it kind of showed us that we've got some capabilities here outside of whom we could get in the transfer portal. Ayo Shotomide-King was very underutilized in high school, which is why he only played 1 year of varsity ball, which is likely why he went severely under-recruited. But when you go back and look at his high school film from a wide receiver standpoint, he was classified as 6'4", 205 pounds, and he looked too slow to play wide receiver, but he wasn't big enough or physical enough to play tight end. However, that was what the recruiting sites seemed to kind of shift him towards, was a tight end in college. He goes to Snow College after having 242 yards in high school in his 1 year under varsity. He did have double-digit touchdowns, which clearly shows that they used him primarily as a red zone target. He also played cornerback in high school, which is actually pretty crazy to watch. But his film as a DB, I don't want to say they look better than his wide receiver film, but his wide receiver film wasn't really a lot to scream about because he didn't really run routes. It was more or less him beating everybody or jumping over everybody. And likewise, when he played cornerback, that's when I think you could really see his hands come out. But you could also see his physicality come out when he played the defensive back position. He goes to Snow Junior College and puts up almost 400 yards in his one season at Snow, and he averaged over 15 yards a catch, and he did score a couple of touchdowns. And he was uncovered by somebody who is renowned as one of the greatest wide receiver technical minds in Casey Dunn. This is aside from the conversation of him as an offense coordinator, but as a wide receiver coach, he is responsible for a lot of the best wide receivers that have come through Oklahoma State. But there also is the tie-in here to Doug Meacham, because the beginning, the Dez Bryants and Justin Blackmons of the world were partially because of the recruiting and the development of Doug Meacham. So there's a lot of maneuverability here for somebody like an Ayo Shotomide-King. The reason that I proclaimed him to be a sleeper in this previous season was because he come in a lot like Leon Johnson III. He plays a lot like Leon Johnson III. And when you see some of the clips coming out of spring last year, it struck me as another individual that could potentially jump up and save the season, much like Leon Johnson III did. Now, the idea behind Leon Johnson was to give him a year of a redshirt, right? Because the physicality was going to be significantly different at this level, and we needed him to beef up. If he added 15 to 20 pounds, he was going to be a tried and true phenom at Oklahoma State in the Big 12 and could launch himself into the national picture. But unfortunately, we needed him in a crunch, and he willingly decided to pull his red shirt, even though he knew it probably wasn't super advantageous for him. It was what was best for the team. And I think that allowed him to at least get his foot in the door in the NFL. But again, he didn't have a lot of film. He didn't have a lot of stats. So it was hard for NFL executives and scouts to kind of latch on to him potentially being a guy. And so for that, I feel like it was kind of cut short. His time at Oklahoma State, we didn't fully get to see what Leon could be. Then enters Ayo Shotomide-King, who's just a bigger version of Leon Johnson III. He walks in the building, 6'4", 215 pounds, gets up to 6'4", 225 fairly quickly. And he was utilized to some degree this previous season, which once again accentuates the fact that we knew that there was talent there, but maybe he was a little bit rough around the edges. Maybe that transitionary period was him just growing into his body and getting more comfortable, because now when you see him on the field, he doesn't look like the high school kid that was like a gazelle just kind of going by people. He wasn't blowing by people, and he wasn't running crisp routes. He was basically just running by people. He's had time to now kind of perfect a lot of that. And you cannot teach 6'4", 225 pounds. You cannot teach the physicality. And one of the reasons that he was projected as a potential tight end was he is really good on the perimeter when it comes to blocking. And a lot of that physicality was showcased when he played DB in high school as well. So the reason he was under-recruited was because nobody really knew what position he was going to be able to play. He only played 1 year of varsity football in the state of California, and nobody knew if he was going to be able to work out. The crazy part is here, before NIL, before this transfer market absolute madness, any wide receiver that was 6'4", 205 pounds coming out of high school with almost a few hundred yards and double-digit touchdowns was likely going to get opportunities. But now we live in this wild, wacky landscape where how many years you played in high school is important. And the stats you put up in high school is important, and your ability to put on weight and all of that is far more important now than it has ever been before. And because of that, we do have to give a shout out to Casey Dunn. Maybe the lasting thing that we can hold on for Casey Dunn is that he was the guy that did in fact help get Ayo Shotomide-King not only, found, right? Because he wasn't heavily recruited after his 1 year at Snow, even though he had like 438 yards. He wasn't heavily recruited. So Casey Dunn did bring us Ayo Shotomide-King. I don't think that we saw enough of Ayo last season. So this is the year. I have no doubt that Talyn Shettron is a bad mamma jamma. I have no doubt that Jalen Lloyd is going to be a good addition, as is Shamar Rigby. But to me, Ayo Shotomide-King is the dude that's going to be able to show us what we could have potentially gotten out of Leon Johnson III if Leon had gotten multiple years at Oklahoma State. This should be a big time for him because, again, everybody's coming in with a clean slate. So even though we brought in some guys in the transfer portal that we think can be depth pieces or can be competitive right away, to me, this is Ayo Shotomide-King's time. And whether he's playing X or Z, opposite of whatever Talyn Shettron's going to play, regardless, when the quarterback needs yards and bunches, he has to trust some of these guys. And Ayo Shotomide-King is bigger than most everybody else. He's stronger than most everybody else. He has a sub 39-inch vertical, which means he can head top all of you. And regardless of who Oklahoma State has at quarterback, we're going to have to rely on a guy like Ayo Shotomide-King to bail us out of bad situations, to put us in moments where we can capitalize on W's, even in moments where it doesn't really seem like it's applicable. We have to have one of those dudes. We've got a couple, but I think Ayo is the one that's going to be raising eyebrows by the end of the year. Speaking of raising eyebrows, whenever you're looking at the clutter in your house and after all of the madness that the holidays provide, sometimes you just want a new look. You want to revolutionize the way that your house looks. If you need a little TLC, Wayfair is here to help you. You're always going to find decluttering a refreshing moment, and it's going to help clear out your space and get you back into a more normal routine. Whether you're simply just tidying up, you're clearing everything out, or you want to give your new space an entirely new look to start the new year, Wayfair has everything that you need, and it's all within your budget. If you're currently looking for furniture, their huge selection makes it easy to find the pieces that fit your style and your budget. The best part is the free and hassle-free delivery, even on larger items. With Wayfair, it's going to make it easy for you to navigate and find everything you need in absolutely no time. There's something for every style in every home with Wayfair, no matter what your space or your budget is. Wayfair also makes it easy for you to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspirations for every single space. Regardless of what your decor needs to be, Wayfair has something that's going to fit your needs. Give your home the refresh that it deserves with Wayfair. Head on over to Wayfair.com right now. That is Wayfair, Wayfair.com, because Wayfair has every style you need to conquer your home the Wayfair way. Now we get to shift gears a little bit here to basketball. Of course, the Cowboys have a game tonight. We'll talk about that here in a second, but I do want to kind of slide over a little bit here to Cade Cunningham. First, the good news for Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons is they did recently pick up another Cowboy, the three-point shooting specialist, formerly of the Thunder and Oklahoma State, is Lindy Waters III. Now, this is obviously very exciting. It gives me reasons to watch the Pistons, and I'm excited to do so. I want to see a couple Cowboys together. You guys know I don't really follow teams per se. Of course, I'm a Thunder fan, being an Oklahoma guy. But I've more or less just watched some of the Oklahoma State players, and the fact that the Pistons now have multiple Cowboys is going to be worth a watch for me. But Cade Cunningham, regardless of how many Cowboys are on the roster, you have to ask, is he getting wasted in Detroit? I mean, he was projected to be the number one overall pick. He was the number one overall pick. He just recently made an all-star team. He made the all-rookie team in his very first year. So he's completely changed the game for the Detroit Pistons, yet they're still basically a 500 ball club. With his 20-point performance against the Bulls the other night, he became the third fastest player in NBA history to reach 4,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 1,300 assists, trailing only Oscar Robertson and Luka Doncic. Yet he's on a basically 500 ball club. And as much as I want to see Lindy and Cade do the daggone thing, I'm almost wanting to see Cade Cunningham get an opportunity. Or I would like to see the Detroit Pistons potentially put some pieces around him that are going to make a big difference. Now, on top of Lindy Waters, they also did bring in another massive trade that is going to be viewed as somebody that could potentially help the Pistons get off of the bottom of the NBA to some degree. I mean, they're not at the bottom, but they have been. So even when Cade Cunningham is dropping 40, 50, 52, 53 points, the Pistons are likely, more often than not, still going to lose. So it is frustrating to have seen some of the great Cowboys that are continuing to be in the NBA. I know Marcus Smart is over there with Memphis and with Ja Morant and Steven Adams. That's going to be worth the watch. Watching what Marcus Smart was able to do with the Celtics and having so many runs at potential titles, it didn't quite work out. But then you also had the grandfather also in Memphis. And Tony Allen was known for his defensive prowess, winning Defensive Player of the Year and being on the all-defensive team multiple times. Marcus Smart has the same capability to kind of carve out the same role. So for that, I'm also excited to watch what the Grizzlies continue to do. But at the end of the day, this is a conversation about one of the greatest Cowboys to ever play in a time frame where we had a lot of good pieces around him, but we still couldn't quite find a way to get it done. And we got bounced in the second round of the NCAA tournament, and Mike Boynton has never really been the same before or after. Now, the connections that Mike Boynton had and Cade's brother obviously coming over to join the staff was absolutely massive. Him choosing some orange and black for the Detroit Pistons jerseys when they did their custom jerseys a little while back, obviously it's good for Oklahoma State and it carries a great name. But while Oklahoma State basketball is in the middle of a rebuild, knowing what we have to look forward to this season was going to be a lot of defense, a lot of hustle, a lot of heart, but maybe not a whole lot of wins. We need some more of these Oklahoma State Cowboys to make big names for themselves in the NBA. And although Cade Cunningham has obviously made a massive name for himself that is synonymous with one of the best players in all of the NBA, we could use some epic runs here. We could use the Tylan Wallace and Justice Hill kind of making it as far as they did with the Ravens. We need a little bit of injection in that. For Oklahoma State to get the most out of what Cade Cunningham and Lindy Waters and Marcus Smart do provide, we need them to make runs. We need to see them in the playoffs. And as it sits right now, I do not know that the Detroit Pistons are investing enough or willing to invest enough to get enough pieces around Cade Cunningham to make that a possibility, especially now with the midseason turn and being a almost 500 ball club. The time frame might be running out. Now, I don't know how much longer Cade Cunningham has before he starts getting a little frustrated with the way things are going in a Pistons uniform. But are the Pistons going to be willing to do enough to build around Cade Cunningham to make something magical work at some point in time in the next couple seasons? Or will they potentially use him as a bargaining piece like we watched the Mavs just do to give way to the Lakers? The Lakers are trying to spin their way into buying more championships. We get it. I understand it. So do the Pistons even have the capability? And I'm not a Pistons fan, so I don't know. Hopefully somebody out here can kind of, in the comment section, let me know, do the Pistons have the ability financially to help chip away at some of the other teams in the league? Do they have the capability to get more pieces around Cade Cunningham? Or do they already owe too much money to other people, including Cade Cunningham, to successfully build around him? Or are they simply going to try to do it through the draft process? Because they got Cade Cunningham in the draft, potentially they're looking for another lottery-style pickup to put alongside Cade before they can finally build into a reasonable factor in the NBA championships, or at least the playoffs. The first thing we need to see is the Pistons getting the playoffs. But I will admit, now that they have Lindy Waters, it is much more fun, the prospect of watching the Pistons, but it is also frustrating to know that we have one of the best players in the NBA being with a team that doesn't appear to have the ability to make any sort of postseason run, and nor does it appear as though that they have the capability to put pieces around him to make this thing make sense. Now, again, I know that on top of Lindy Waters, they also brought in another former lottery guy that could potentially chip in right away. Let me know down in the comments section for you NBA folks that know a little bit more about this stuff than I do. I've just been seeing that Oklahoma State fans are very frustrated with how Cade Cunningham is getting utilized in Detroit, or basically wasted in Detroit. And it's hard to pump up one of the Cowboys in the NBA doing the daggone thing when he's with a team that seems to be getting in their own way, instead of allowing him to not only flourish, but find his way into the postseason. He's clearly good enough to get there. He's clearly good enough to guide a team there. The question is, are the Pistons doing enough, or do they care to do enough to get the pieces around Cade to make a run for this thing? Or are they setting this whole deal up to eventually use Cade in some monetary gain situation like we just recently seen? You don't have to be an NBA expert to see that Cade Cunningham, unfortunately, is getting wasted. Now they has Lindy Waters and another massive piece. Perhaps this is what they need to kind of turn the tide here. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, because this is not my area of expertise, but I have been paying attention to how many Oklahoma State fans are complaining about the Pistons in general and what Cade Cunningham's going through. And whenever he drops 40, 50, they still find ways to lose. It's just, it's absolutely maddening to have a champion that'll rock orange and black all day, every day, and rep O State till he's blue in the face, yet he can't really do much with it because he's stuck in Detroit. Unlike Malcolm Rodriguez, he ain't stuck in Detroit. Matter of fact, the Lions are one of the funnest portions of the NFL seasons for the last couple of years, and I think even for the next year or so, the Lions are going to be a huge factor. We want the Pistons to do the same so Detroit can become a cowboy country. So the Cowboys will get the opportunity to win another game, which is 2 of the last 3. So this would be 3 of the last 4 if we can get this W. And TCU obviously is not an easy team to play, especially when you've got to go to their place. But TCU is a 500 ball club. They have the same exact record as we do overall. We're both 12-11. Now we're 4-8 in the Big 12. They're 5-7 in the Big 12. They do have Coach Dixon, which I absolutely adore and respect, and I'm so happy that he'll not only return back to TCU after making some absolutely massive runs at Pitt, but the fact that he stayed there for quite some time when he's had some massive years that could have very easily led him to being taken away from TCU. So this is a pretty big game, and it'll be a good opportunity to see if Jamiron Keller can continue to stay hot, if Connor Dow is going to continue to get more minutes. Is Abu Usman going to be able to assert his authority down low? Is Bryce Thompson going to be able to string together another double-figure scoring performance, because he's put about 9 straight together? And he's not, absolutely blowing the doors off of people, but he's doing more than enough to prove that he's still got some capabilities. And is this kind of Oklahoma State getting, I don't want to say hot late, but you do want to kind of reach your peak towards the end of the season before you get into conference play. We are still competing for a good spot in the conference tournament, and we could make a little bit of a run at this thing. Not that we're going to win a title. I'm not crazy, but we could make a run. We could make it difficult. On the flip side, you got the Cowgirls taking on Arizona. This is an opportunity for Jacie Hoyt to kind of continue to chop down the top half of the Big 12 leaderboard. The Cowgirls are 19-4 and 9-3 in the Big 12, while Arizona is 15-10 and 6-6 in the Big 12. So this should be a W. The concerning factor here is typically after we have a massive win and we get ranked, we drop one. This is going to be an opportunity to kind of stave off some of the complacency and get a W. We've also had Anna Gredasi, one of the top 3 in the Big 12 in three-point shooting and percentages. Well, we also have Stailee Heard, and Stailee Heard is top 10 in scoring in the Big 12. She's top 3 in efficiency and productive minutes. She's top 15 in three-point scoring as well. But the thing that we have to circle around here too is, if you recall the beginning of the season, we weren't getting a whole lot out of Stailee Heard. We were getting a lot out of Jacie Hoyt. We were obviously getting a lot out of Anna Gredasi. Micah Gray was proving to be a good point scoring specialist in the beginning of the season. But Stailee Heard was kind of just, playing a role. Instead of being the star and taking over ball games like we need her to do. The beginning of the season, she wasn't doing that. She was kind of filling out the rest of the roster, and she was scoring when it was a necessity, but she wasn't pressing. And not that she's pressing unnecessarily now, but you can see there's an emphasis on her getting to the bucket and her getting to the three-point line and her putting up shots and her getting off the most important shots when the shot clock is winding down. So we have shifted, and Jacie Hoyt has talked about when Stailee Heard is confident, she's one of the best players in the Big 12, if not one of the best players in the country. She has been named as one of the finalists for the National Player of the Year, as she should be. Averaging almost 17 points a game is impressive, especially when you take into consideration that the first, 15 games of the year, she wasn't really viewed as a primary scorer. So she's done all of this towards the latter half of the season, right? Not quite the halfway point to now. And she's catapulted herself to one of the top basketball players in the country. But for Oklahoma State, I kind of wanted to talk about where she could potentially end up as a WNBA star for a school that hasn't had an overabundance of those. Cowgirl basketball has not been in the upper echelon for very long at all. This is, a sport that I think kind of overlooked for a decent amount of time. So we don't have an overabundance of drafted WNBA Cowgirls, but I feel like Stailee Heard is well on her way to being one of the next. Recently, we did have Natasha Mack in 2021, drafted number 16 overall in the second round. We also had Tiffany Bias, one of the queens of Cowgirl basketball, also picked up in the second round, number 17 overall, and she did go on to play for a WNBA title. Tony Young in 2013 was a first rounder, the number 7 pick overall. Andrea Riley might be the actual queen of Cowgirl basketball next to Tiffany Bias, but she was a first rounder picked up as the number 8 overall pick after scoring 2,835 points in her Cowgirl career. Much like Andrea Riley, Stailee Heard came in and was able to play early as a freshman. She has the opportunity to stay for all 4 years to get up to this queen of the court and Gallagher-Iba conversation, and she's already getting close to that in just 2 years in a Cowgirl uniform. Because, again, we don't have an overabundance of Cowgirls that have gotten drafted to the WNBA. Cowgirl basketball hasn't really been a focal point until Kirk Butke, and now you have Jacie Hoyt. Jacie Hoyt is already well on her way to potentially putting her name up in the rafters as the top Cowgirl basketball coach. Now, she's got a long way to go, but she has connections to this area. Obviously, her mom was one of the greatest high school coaches in the country, not only the state of Kansas. So her familiarity with the regionality could allow her to stay here for quite some time. And that's another reason why Stailee Heard could end up being a 4-year Cowgirl that's up there in the queen of the court conversation with Andrea Riley, with Tiffany Bias. Is she a first rounder? I don't know. But she's definitely proving as a sophomore, as a true sophomore, that she's about to get some Cade Cunningham treatment in a Cowgirl uniform. And as time progresses, she's likely going to be the mainstay that we call upon at the end of the game to hit the game winners, to take the biggest shots and the biggest moments to get us to the biggest games. This Cowgirl team does still have an opportunity to win a regular season Big 12 title. We'll have the opportunity to win a postseason Big 12 title, and we will absolutely punch a ticket to the NCAAs. The question is, what is our seeding going to be? What region are we going to end up at? And how are we going to end the season? What kind of run? Or do we kind of go on a little bit of a lull? Regardless, this is a top 20 Cowgirl basketball team that is good enough to compete in the top 10, top 15. We've just got like 3 big losses that have kind of been the hindrance to us this year. And they've typically come after 3 of the biggest wins. So this is a good time for Oklahoma State fans to rally around Cowgirl basketball. But not only that, Stailee Heard is proven to be somebody extremely special. And if she can stay here, she'll have the opportunity to continue to carve her name into the Mount Rushmore of Cowgirl basketball and launch herself into the WNBA as a draft pick, which we haven't had a lot of. All righty, y'all. Cowboys and Cowgirls are going to get tipped off here before too long, so we're going to skedaddle on off here. That's all we're going to have for this one. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Like it if you like the daggone thing. Dislike if you don't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe to my podcast. People out there, you're all of it. The bread, the butter, the fountain fondue, funny stuff, funky stuff. You get it. Do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave a review. All right, y'all. Later, taters.